deeper reality is quantum. And these properties that I mentioned can only exist in the quantum reality. And that's why many people have sensed that there is a affinity between quantum physics and consciousness and free will and these things. But nobody has been able to put together this whole thing in a way in which now it makes sense, and it is scientific, and it is a physical theory that can be disproven or supported by experiments. So now qualia are the inner experience of the field that corresponds to a quantum state, to the quantum state of that field. Absolutely. So this is not, kind of,
No,
that's
what it is.
And then free will without consciousness would make no sense, right?
Right.
Free will, you need to know what you want to have free will, right? So that's why physicists could never attribute free will to the collapse of the wave function, because they never understood that those fields are conscious. Once you see that the fields are conscious, then that's the correct interpretation of the collapse of the wave function. Done.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernie Beitman, and one of the main reasons I've studied synchronicity is not for it in itself, but to get some idea about the nature of reality. And today we're going to have some really good answers to questions like, what is our purpose in life? What is free will? Actually, who are we? And what are we doing here, and how do we go about doing it? And one of my currently favorite ideas, been around for a long time, is the witnessing self, or our observing self, or self-observer, as I call it. And these are the fundamentals that we will get to today. And my guest today is a remarkable man. Federico Faggin created MOS silicon technology that underlies all modern computer activity, all modern computing activity. You got that? The first commercial microprocessor, the touchpad, the touch screen, and the neural nets that all contemporary artificial intelligence uses. That's a lot. After an extraordinary experience, after doing all that creative technology, he had an experience of consciousness more than 30 years ago that opened up his heart, not his mind, but his heart. And he's devoted his work to understanding the nature of consciousness, which, along with free will, he postulates to be a fundamental aspect of reality. Federico, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence.
Thank you, Bernie. It's a pleasure to be with you and explore this wonderful reality that we are in.
It's a wonderful reality. It can be a lot of fun, and that's the idea. And I think Einstein said that play is the best form of research, and I like that. But let's start with the fundamental question I have for you. What have you learned about the nature of reality?
Yeah. What I have learned is encapsulated in a postulate that is the postulate of being. I call it the postulate of being, that says the following. One is the totality of what exists. So one has three properties: is dynamic, is holistic, and wants to know itself.
And
So,
wants to know itself.
wants
I'm
to
going to
know
repeat
itself.
that one. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, and wants to know itself. So dynamic means that one is never the same instant after instant. Very simple. Never the same. Always changing. Holistic means that one is not made of separable parts. Everything within one is interconnected, can communicate with each other. There is no separation between the parts of one. Now, so far, I have described the universe as quantum physics understands it. So, no big deal here. Physicists have arrived at this conclusion. The universe is dynamic and holistic. But I add one thing, right? One wants to know itself. We can talk later where is this coming from? Well, the Greeks at the Temple of Delphi, where there was no thyself.
Know thyself.
Right? Yeah. So, but why does it make sense? Because how can you explain evolution if you don't explain evolution as a self-knowing of one? The evolution of the universe that we have observed. So to know yourself is so foundational. And also we know within ourselves, the deepest longing that I have is to know myself and to know who I am, to know the other like myself too. This is what really I want. And so if I am indeed a creation of one, an aspect of one, then clearly I must reflect within myself the same longing that must be a longing of one. This cannot be demonstrated. This cannot be proven. It's not a mathematical thing because consciousness cannot prove its own existence because consciousness is the fact that you know. So it is consciousness that creates the mathematics that we use to explain the world. So how can mathematics, that is a creation of consciousness, explain consciousness? And also free will. So consciousness in this, when you start with this posture, what is consciousness? It's very simple. It's the capacity of one to know itself. It's the capacity of one to know itself. Done. You don't need to have a complicated definition of consciousness. It's the capacity to know.
The
And to know
capacity
what?
to
To know itself, because
to-
there is only one. So to know, for one to know anything, he knows itself.
and are you referring to the one as also you and as also me, as well as the broader
We
as
are
the
we are parts whole of one, parts whole. In other words, we are a point of view of one with which one has known itself the first time with that point of view. So we represent a point of view of one upon itself, a perspective of one upon itself, a direction in which one is seeing itself. When one knows itself for the first time in that direction, it brings into existence what it knows. It brings into existence what is known. So knowing and existing are absolutely two faces of the same coin.
I'd like to be clearer about what the one means in the sentence you're using. Sometimes it sounds like me, the
The
person,
totality, one is the totality of what exists.
and then as I get to know myself, there's also a one involved.
Let me explain how this works. But before I go too far, I want to say one more thing about
Please.
this postulate. I said one wants to know itself. So the wanting is the expression of the capacity of one to direct its own self-knowing. So one has free will. One wants to know itself, so it's directing its own self-knowing. It would be obvious because one would be the God of all gods in a way. But I don't want to give them any more properties that are necessary to actually understand. And this is the minimum that I have come to. Just like Occam razor, right? You want the minimum set of properties to start with a logical process and an intuitive process and a process that has heart and a process that has courage. So things that seldom are contained in the understanding of science that only wants to study what can be measuring space and time. But what can be measuring space and time is only what appears here. They are numbers. You cannot measure something that doesn't shows up as a number. But what we feel goes way beyond numbers. They're not numbers. The qualia, the sensations and feelings that we have are not numbers. That's why there is quantum physics, because quantum physics is not made of numbers. It's made of complex numbers. But complex numbers are not the real numbers of space and time. Complex numbers, they have one part which is real and one part which is imaginary. The imaginary part is square root of -1. But there is no number that multiplied by itself gives you -1. So here we're playing with math, which is a creation of consciousness, of course. We have created math. Math must exist because there is coherence within one. One is not self-contradictory. It couldn't exist if it was self-contradictory. So the nature of one has a mathematical aspect, but the mathematical aspect of the nature of one is not all there is. So science that relies exclusively on mathematics cannot express all that is, can only express a very small part of what it is. Okay.
And that's what the first part of your book tends to be about.
Yes.
And this is the book. The book is irreducible. And by irreducible, Federico means consciousness is not reducible. It is as it is. And the subtitle, Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature. And that's a lot. I mean, this book is a philosophical treatise about the nature of reality in the direction that I have continued to look, that I wanted to be able to know some of the ideas that are in this book of Irreducible and know it in a language that is understandable and clear that regular people, including me, can understand and use. Fundamental to this book, among the many fundamentals that you have just heard, is the desire for each of us to get to know ourselves as well. And getting to know ourselves is part of the greater consciousness getting to know itself. That's what it looks like to me. Then how do we get to that? Well, Federico, you came up with an old word to use once more in this time, satiety. Could you tell us what you mean by satiety?
Yeah. Satiety is, from the scientific point of view, is a field like a quantum field, but a quantum field, not a classical field, a quantum field that has consciousness and free will. And it is generated by one when one knows itself with a certain point of view. As I was saying earlier, when one knows itself with a certain point of view, it brings into existence what it knows. It brings into existence what it knows. From where does it come from? From nothing? No. It comes from potential existence, which is, you can imagine, like, is the stuff that one doesn't know. But just because one doesn't know that stuff doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It can only exist when it's seen by one. And so there has to be potential existence. And the potential existence is like the unconscious of one, if you want to look at it that way. You are a psychiatrist. So
Yes.
it's the void. In some religions or some spiritual doctrines, there is the notion of void. Well, to me, this is actually science. It's not philosophy. There is philosophy, of course, but it's philosophy, science, and spirituality rolled into one. My theory actually allows you to explain why we have to have quantum physics with the laws and the indeterminacy and all this stuff that quantum physics has that has never been understood. Why is this world start with quantum physics? It can be explained precisely by the fact that one wants to know itself. The first time that one knows itself with that point of view, because when we know ourselves, we are, we have a glance in a direction, right? So we glance ourselves in a direction because one is holistic. One must know itself entirely in that direction, with that point of view, with that perspective. So It brings into existence what? A field. It cannot bring a thing, but it brings into existence a field which is, of course, stays connected with one. It's like a state of one. But this state of one is a field that is connected with one because one is holistic. It cannot create parts which are disconnected from itself. So it is a part whole, because then it can see itself. Since one can see itself in many directions, different directions, in fact, in a potentially infinite number of directions, then every time it knows itself, it brings into existence what it knows. And that is a part whole of itself. So it has all the properties of one, meaning the part that it has created also can create another part of itself. So it is itself a creator. It wants to know itself. It has free will and it has consciousness. We are this stuff. We are generations of this stuff. Before we get to us, we have to start with the fields of particles. So an electron is a particle, according to physics. Maybe there is something simpler that we can explain the electron in the future, but for now, we take it as something which is indivisible, that has properties, spin, position, and momentum, and that's it. Those are defined this particle right now. But in fact, there is something more that we don't understand, because these particles can get entangled together. They have states in common that cannot be known. And so we have other stuff that can be explained actually quite nicely with the quantum field theory that says that an electron is not an object, is a state of a field. Just like we are a state of one, the state of the field of electrons is what we call electrons. But that is like a wave on the surface of a sea. You cannot separate the wave from the sea. So the property of the wave are the properties of the sea that manifest in that wave, right? Okay. So the same thing here. The properties of the electrons are the properties of the field of electrons. And that's why two electrons that are two states of a field can be entangled, can have the property that connect them that appear as disconnected from the outside, because we recognize only electrons. We only measure electrons. We don't know fields. Fields is a notion that we have. But they remain connected from within the field. That's why you have these crazy properties. It's called entanglement in quantum physics that does not exist with objects in space and time. And that's why the state of the quantum field cannot be expressed in space and time. It must be expressed in a deeper reality, which is right now captured by a n-dimensional space, where n can be infinite in physics, can be infinite, but in any event, as large a number as you wish. And the dimensions are complex numbers. They are not real numbers like the three-dimensional space of our space, what we think is our space. Our space-time has three dimensions, which are real, and one dimension, which is time. Is 3 plus 1. 3 are space and 1 dimension time. So going back then to this idea that one creates these fields which have the same properties of conscious free will, the desire to know themselves, then these fields, which physics call quantum fields, in this model, they are like the quantum fields of physics. That's where the connection with science is, with physics. But they are conscious and have free will, which the fields of science do not have consciousness and free will. So having free will, having consciousness, first of all, they can experience their own state. And the quantum state of the field is actually the best description, the best representation that mathematics has for an inner state that can only be known by the field itself. Our conscious experience is just like a quantum state. Our conscious experience does not exist in the body, in the symbol. The body is the symbol. Our experience actually doesn't exist in the body, does not exist in space and time. It exists in that deeper reality where quantum fields are. You see? So the quantum field knows itself by experiencing itself, by the sensations and feelings that it proves, just like we do. So there is nothing magic. In fact, the postulate that I expressed at the beginning is the only postulate of physics that is self-evident. You know why it's self-evident? Because we know that we are conscious, and we know that we have some modicum of free will. So why do we have to then explain consciousness and free will? It is consciousness and free will that can explain the rest.
We don't have to explain it because each of us has consciousness and each of us has free will.
Yeah, but explaining is like knowing, right? Why does reality work the way it works, right? That's physical reality. Science, all of science is about knowing too, right? That's what moves people to be scientists. They want to know, they want to understand. Many want to know or to understand with the purpose of owning something, being more than something. That's not a pure kind of know yourself. The pure know yourself has no purpose other than know yourself. Wow. Enjoy who you are. Love yourself. Love the others. That's the core of this stuff. At the foundation of the universe, or the foundation of one is this. Because how can one hate itself? It couldn't exist if it hated itself. So hatred and the negative emotions, ill things must be consequences of something, must be consequences that are the missing something which is not property of one. So if you miss light, you have darkness. If you miss love, you have hatred. But hatred doesn't exist ontologically. You see, all these ideas, describe a reality which has none of the attributes that religions or science is attributing to reality, because science is all based on the foundations of physics, right? Even psychology, because if you say that everything is material, everything that exists is matter, space, and time, if you start with a starting point, then everything comes from physics. But I'm not saying that, because to know yourself is not about matter. To know yourself is much deeper. In fact, this starting point unites spirituality and physics, unites them. They become part and parcel of themselves. It is the recognition that we have an interiority out of which exteriority emerges, but both must exist. Both must exist. I know myself by having a dialogue with myself, having a dialogue with others. The dialogue with myself is my thinking. The dialogue with others is a communication.
And through that communication with oneself, and for me as a psychiatrist, the interactions with others, the communication with others is a prominent, important way to get to know ourselves. And part of getting to know ourselves is to recognize that the distortions, like guilt and hatred, are
Yes.
distortions that we are here to try to clear.
Absolutely. That's right. They are misunderstanding. They are misunderstanding. You can ask, but why do you have misunderstandings? Very simple. In this theory, we can explain quantum physics starting from consciousness and free will. So what is it that in quantum physics has the properties of a conscious experience and the property of free will? Simple. The quantum state, which is representable in a n-dimensional space with complex dimension, as I said earlier, that quantum state is proven that it cannot be reproduced. So physics is the no cloning theorem. The no cloning theorem says a quantum state cannot be reproduced. It also says that all the maximum things that you can know about that quantum state is 1 bit per quantum bit. So a quantum bit is the generalization of the classical bit 0, 1, the classical bit that we use in computers, the classical bit that allows you to do a simulation of this physical reality in space and time. Classical, however, not quantum, classical. The extension, the generalization of that is the qubit. So the qubit, it represents an infinity of states. And how can you imagine them? Any point on the surface of a sphere, which is a direction in space, any direction in space is a state of a qubit. So it has infinite possibilities, a qubit, a quantum bit. When you make a measurement, however, you have to decide in which direction you measure the qubit. But no matter in which direction you measure it, you get 0 or 1. One measurement, you cannot tell what the qubit is. In fact, you would need a huge number of quantum bits prepared the same way, and then through a well thought through method of measuring, somebody that doesn't know how those things have been prepared, but only knows that they've been all prepared the same way, can actually tell you pretty closely the direction of that qubit. But you need almost an infinity of them to actually know that direction. So you can see how crazy quantum physics is. You basically need to do a tomography of that quantum bit, a tomography in a very large number of directions, and then you have, sometimes you have 0, sometimes you have 1, and then by a proper understanding of the structure of how the qubit works, you can actually tell in which direction it is. The person that knows, on the other hand, where the direction of the qubit, because he prepared that in that direction, it is possible to prepare qubits in that direction, that prepare that, he knows. So he doesn't need, even if he measures it in the same direction, he will find them always in that direction. But if he measures in the different directions, he finds sometimes 1, sometimes 0. So it disturbs the system, and the system now is no longer predictable. Not even by the one that knew, because he prepared it. You see how crazy these things are. Why is it that way? Because my experience, my conscious experience, cannot be reproduced. Even myself, I have that experience, cannot tell you what I feel. I can describe what I feel, but to describe what I feel is a bit per quantum bit. Describing reduces the amount of information that I can tell you about what I feel. The love that I feel for the child, for my child, wow. I mean, it has dimensions. That love is not a number. That love, that feeling is not a number. My words can be reduced to numbers. My words are vibration in space and time. It's like an object. And that can be reduced to a series of numbers. But what I feel is not a number. And that explains why quantum physics is crazy, because this quantum state does not describe reality. It describes the inner reality of the universe that can only manifest in the space and time a very small portion of what it is. So I have explained now that if you are conscious and you have a conscious experience, which is private, we know that it's private. We know that I cannot know what you're feeling right now. What you can tell me about your feel is very small amount of what you actually feel. And we had to work with that. That's where the miscommunication can come, because by using words which reduce completely, we can actually misunderstand. And so this misunderstanding upon misunderstandings can create all kinds of issues that then we need to clear up. In fact, we are here in this world, in this space-time, in this simulator, which is exactly for that purpose, to find out where we went wrong. Not body. The body is just an instrument to allow you to do that. We are those fields, so we can find out where we went wrong. So it's not me or my brain that finds out. Me and my brain are helpers, are useful instrument for who I am, which is this field, conscious and free will, that wants to know itself. So that's that. One more thing, which is explaining why we have free will and how does it correlate with quantum physics. So quantum physics cannot tell you, except for very special cases, cannot tell you what is the next state of a quantum system. Can only give you the probabilities of all the possible states in which a system can be found. It can tell you the possibilities and their probabilities. That's what quantum physics can do. But when you do a measurement, you find one of those possibilities. You find the system is in one of those possible states. So how can that happen? How can you go from this potentiality into that actuality that you measure? It's called the collapse of the wave function. It's actually a hack. It's like saying, I don't know. I know that this will happen, that you go from many to one. And how can we explain it? We cannot explain it. In fact, we have found today, we know that that collapse of the wave function is random, completely random. There is no rhyme or reason, because when you repeat the measurement, another state comes first and they come in completely different combination. And it was the existence of the entanglement that is a property, as I mentioned earlier, that does not exist in classical systems in space and time, that also force you to understand that the only way to explain it is that that collapse of the wave function is a non-algorithmic randomness. In other words, there is not a rule underneath that randomness. There are no hidden variables behind this randomness that could explain that is actually deterministic, that you could possibly know what that thing has done. That's exactly what you need to have a free will. The decision of the field in which place to manifest the electron in space and time, that decision was done by the field. And it has to be free, meaning not to you, it looks random. But for the field that made the decision, he wanted to have the electron there. See? So here we go. Now we talk about synchronicities and all this kind of stuff, right? Because now from you is random, but from me, the field that acted and put that electron in that place, he knew before doing it, he knew where it was going to do. For you, you don't know. You see? So there are two types of randomness here. There is the randomness of classical physics, that is lack of knowledge of what is otherwise knowable, already exists. And that appears to the person that doesn't have all the knowledge as a random event with some probability. For example, you toss a coin, right? You toss a coin, and if the coin is balanced, half of the time it will come heads and half of the time it comes tails, right? And since you don't know all the motions and that, you have what appears to you a random event. But if you actually had all of the information to make the computation about the nature of the table, the air that you have, and you have a very fast computer, you could actually predict ahead of time exactly heads or tails. So what happens in that case is certain to a computer that can do the computations. But to you, the best that you can do is 50-50, a probability. So the concept of probability starts with a conscious being that wants to know what's going to happen. So a probability is not a physical variable. It is actually a mental construct that we have created because we want to find out what's going to come next. Our own survival depends on having a model of the world that allows us to act properly in the world. So much for classical probability.
Well, subjective probability is a very key part of what you're talking about. And I have an idea of subjective probability when it comes to synchronicity, because when people calculate the probability of a coincidence. They just do base rate multiplications. They don't take in the meaning of it to the person, the emotional.
Absolutely. No, in classical physics, let's be clear. Classical physics, there is no meaning. If there is no meaning, there is no consciousness. Consciousness is about meaning. It's about an experience. The experience is sensations and feelings, and that experience reveals meaning.
Explain that, please. Explain that, please.
Yeah.
Sensation and feeling
Sensation
gets to
and feelings. Okay, so
gets to meaning.
So how do I go from feeling love? I feel love. It's an energy, it's something that I feel. Okay. What is the meaning of that love to me? I can say, well, the meaning is that I am attracted to that person that I love. Well, but it could be self-love, that I'm attracted to myself or whatever, right? But the meaning is, what do you get out of that sensation or that feeling? The meaning is, what does it mean to you? And of course, if you go deeper, you can ask, but what is it about that person that I love? But
Yeah.
if you try to figure it out by looking into the feeling of love that you feel, that's when you are trying to actually understand. Because if you don't, you then confabulating some kind of reason why you're loving that is not in the love itself. You see the trick there? So that's the difference between the knowing from the feeling without going into words immediately that capture and reduce what you were feeling. And now you live in the world of symbols, no longer in the world of meaning. I mean, the essence of a spiritual experience is to stay in that spiritual experience. You don't try to capture it, bring it into space and time, into symbolic form, and reduce that to something which is only a little thing of respect of what you could have known if you stayed in the vastness without capturing. The capturing into words is like the collapse of the wave function. You're sensing the state, which is a state that doesn't have boundaries, is dynamic, but then you want to get it.
Yeah, and you want to capture that, and that loses a lot.
That's right.
And that's a beautiful statement of meaning, and thank you very much for that. In the time we have remaining, I'd like to begin with talking about consciousness that each of us has, that I call the self-observer, and some people call the witness. And in your book, you talked about two different states, potentially, of the self-observer. One is the detached scientist, which is what cognitive therapists tend to suggest. Also, meditation teachers tend to have this distance from experience thing to detach and watch. While from the quantum physics state that each of us has within us, but doesn't recognize the way you're helping us do, we are participants in that state. Our observer has to be part of it because we are part of that consciousness. Would you please talk about those two issues?
In order to explain more precisely, I need to explain more clearly the distinction that is behind, which came out earlier a little bit. But the fact that my experience as a field, if I don't have a body, because this theory allows conscious being to exist without a body. So that's another thing that I wanted to make sure, because we are so indoctrinated into think that we are the body, that we think that if we don't have a body, we are not conscious, because consciousness is produced by the brain. No, in this theory, consciousness produces brains, not is produced by the brain. So in other words, the consciousness is much more fundamental than the physical body. And if we don't have that clear, then the language would be ambiguous. So let's get that clear. So I am the field, and the field is in a state that continuously to evolve. Okay. If I want to communicate, I can only communicate a portion of my state with classical symbols. Classical symbols are like numbers and in space and time, and they can only represent a very minor part, a bit per quantum bit of what I feel. So if I allow myself to continue to feel what I'm feeling and I express what I'm feeling without stopping that process, without stopping the movement of consciousness, I can do that, but I need to be very highly trained to be able to do that. Because generally, what we do is that when we capture something, we also stop the movement of feeling. And that's why often we need silence to be able to understand that movement, because otherwise, all this mental noise that we have will not allow even to have a sense of what we are deeply. And what we are deeply is this capacity to know both ourselves and others in a state without having to grab,
Hmm.
or without
Yeah,
having
yeah, yeah.
to, yeah.
How do we do that? How do we maximize that potential to know the other person with intentionally minimizing the capturing that words, that
Well, that,
symbols
that
tend to
takes a
do?
lot of training, because we have been trained to go in the other direction since we were kids, right? We were trained to move away from what appeared to be a daydreaming. Just think about when you were 3 or 4 and you were in a game with other kids. You lost yourself in that game. You
Yeah,
were the game. You
yeah, yeah,
became
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
game.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
what I'm talking about. But the moment that you try to grab something, boom, the magic is gone. It's like the collapse of the wave function. It's like when you had a thought, and instead of allowing the thought to progress and go in its way, you immediately want to bring it into words. The way we think now is we think verbally. We
Yes,
don't even understand that before the transformation from a thought, a real thought, the thought of a field, and the thought of a machine, there is this transformation from a field to words, to symbols. And the symbols, they should be the carrier of the meaning. They're not symbols, period. In science, information is only symbols without meaning. That's another major problem that has confused us and has created this sort of dystopic world, which is the idea that information, in the theory of information, is only the probability of appearance of a symbol, inversely proportional to the probability of appearance of a symbol, period. There is no meaning in the symbol. All you need to do is to recognize the symbol. You recognize 0 or 1. That's it. No meaning to 0, no
good,
meaning to 1.
good. The symbol, I heard you say, should be a carrier of meaning, which it
Absolutely.
means to me
Yeah.
is that someone who I love tells me that she enjoys mangoes in China right now, like
Yeah.
today. I could feel her enjoyment.
That's right. That's right. And of course, you can feel that enjoyment because you also have memories about all your communication. So now all of a sudden, the information carried by a symbol to you, that you have a history with this other person, it allows you to resonate more with the other person than a person that didn't have this history. That's how we can, in fact, create new entities in the field, between fields. When two fields communicating end up reaching a resonance between each other, and when that resonance has been completed, you basically create a new field. It's a field of fields. That's how then from electrons and protons you get atoms of hydrogen, and the atom of hydrogen is not the sum of the electron and proton. It's completely different properties. Only in classical physics, the whole is the sum of the parts. The properties of the whole is the sum of the properties of the part. Only in classical physics, not in quantum physics, because in quantum physics, we deal with meaning. We do not deal with information.
Mhm.
You see, I mean, now I think I have succeeded probably in scrambling a lot of fixed points of reference that we had about reality, which is the materialist mindset and the reductionistic mindset that we live in. Reductionism says that one must be made of parts that are separable. That's what reductionism says. Starts with taking apart something. Well, if you don't recognize that when you take apart something which is a quantum thing, you have done something which is not possible. When you have taken apart, you have destroyed what you had before.
Federico, this is reminding me now of a conversation between Jung and Pauli, a physicist and a psychiatrist talking with each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And we each have we come at it again with different experiences. And the image that you gave to me that I got from you about the two fields, like the mango field that I was just indicating, trying to
Yeah.
as an indicator, is that two separate fields merged and became yet a newer field.
Yes.
And from that, then what happens after that newer field that seems to be made out of each of us? What happens then?
That field then can know itself with the combined point of views of the two of you.
Oh,
So it
wow.
has a new point of view, which is the combination of the two. But it starts with the self-knowing, which is what you have reached. So it starts at a much higher level because you and the other person started with a lower level to reach all this comprehension together, right? So it starts at another level, and then it communicates with other fields that are at the same level, more or less, that they can comprehend each other and move on. We as conscious beings, we as fields, are probably thousands of levels above the field of elementary particles. Maybe hundreds of thousands. I don't know. I mean, that's all to be found out, to be reserved. But now there is a theory that explains the combination problem in panpsychism, which has never been explained before, because panpsychist starts with the idea that reality is a classical world. No, reality is deeper. Reality is quantum. And these properties that I mentioned can only exist in the quantum reality. And that's why many people have sensed that there is a affinity between quantum physics and consciousness and free will and these things. But nobody has been able to put together this whole thing in a way in which now it makes sense and it is scientific and it is a physical theory that can be disproven or supported by experiments. So now qualia are the inner experience of the field that corresponds to a quantum state, to the quantum state of that field. Absolutely. So this is not, oh, well, kind of, no.
No,
No,
that's
that's
what
what
it
it
is.
is. And then free will, free will without consciousness would make no sense, right?
Right.
Free will, you need to know what you want to have free will, right? So that's why physicists could never attribute free will to the collapse of the wave function, because they never understood that those fields are conscious. Once you see that the fields are conscious, then that's the correct interpretation of the collapse of the wave function. Done.
I'm still in this interpersonal thing too, and that's more clarity. That's more clarity. That's more clarity. Thank you. The, once I'll call it the mango story, separate. She's enjoying a mango in a way that I can feel it, and so we create a new field together. But then that field changes as each of us go separately to other fields to
Yeah.
experience that, and then we can come back to have yet a new field between us that we co-create. And so it keeps being this.
Yeah. But over the long run, once you and her, assuming that you and her have decided that you want to create this new field, okay, by continuing to communicate, reach the maximum resonance between the two fields, meaning that the meaning in her field and the meaning of you have reached the maximum. They reached all that is possible. At that point, there is a new field that is created. This field is not created in this space and time, it's created in this other reality, which is much deeper. You see, we do
And
not exist. See, we are so constrained to thinking that we are the body. That we
You're seeing me
always,
do it. You're seeing me doing it. Yes,
of
I'm
course,
doing it.
and we only come back to that, and so now we cannot understand anymore. We're trying to understand something which cannot be understood because we're not in space and time. So this theory, by the way, this theory is actually saying that space, time, matter, and energy cannot be the way physicists have told us. That if reality starts with knowing, and knowing and existence are two faces of the same coin, then the new physics, that is no longer physics of the measurable things in space and time, is physics and spirituality, is the physics that understands the interiority and the exteriority. This new physics will be able to explain things in ways that we couldn't possibly understand today, because we are still constrained by this idea that all that exists has to be in space and time. Because most physicists believe that quantum physics is only math that allows you to predict what you can measure in space and time.
Well,
And if you have that idea,
No,
you
you're gone.
basically you have eliminated meaning, purpose, and interiority
so
from the
important.
universe
So
by
important.
definition. And that's the
Yeah.
essence of materialism. Materialism has eliminated from
Meaning and
reality
purpose.
anything which is not measurable in space and time.
Right. Well, I'm still trying to be in the quantum field of my consciousness with her consciousness,
Yeah.
creating another consciousness, and it's still I'm doing certainly
Yeah,
regular physics.
It may take millions of years, you know.
Well, well, I still would like to know, as I'm doing this, about where our self-observers have a role, because our self-observers are our little bit of consciousness that each of us seems to walk around with, even though it's not in our body.
To understand this, Bertie, you had to go way beyond the confines of the ego. The ego, how do I define the ego? What we think we are is mostly the ego, okay?
Mhm.
Even people
Body.
that have gone quite a bit further in connecting themselves with the higher self. Still, while we are embodied, we had to live here, you know, we had to exist here, we have to survive here. So
We do,
you know,
right?
we are very constrained. So what is the ego? The ego is a portion of myself, the larger, the vaster self, which is this field that does not exist in space-time, is that portion that believes to be the body, that believes to be the body. What does it
But
mean?
isn't. But
What does it
isn't.
mean? It means that it pays attention only to the signals produced by the body.
Yes, it does. And we're told to do that more and more these days.
Of course. And scientism and materialism and reductionism says that's all there is, man.
Hey, where are you from? California or something? Okay. Someplace in California? And all there is, man. Well, our bodies are supposed to be our pick up information for us that we
Our
can pay
body
attention
is
to.
the filter. It is the filter. The body takes the stuff which is on this side of the body, which is this reality that we don't know what it is, because we only take a minute, almost infinitesimal amount of information from this reality, transform it into a reality on the other side of this filter, and we look at that, the other side of the filter, and we say, wow, look at that beautiful flower or that tree and so on. But that is a construction of the sensory brain system of this thing. And we give a value of reality to that, and only to that. There is reality to that, sure, but it's not the deeper reality. And that's the point. And it is that deeper reality that scientism has erased, has just thrown away.
I think the self-awareness, the self-observer is a link across that boundary.
First of all, you have the self-observer because the ego is not separate from the sati. It's a small part of the sati, but it's not separate from the sati.
Yeah.
So to the degree that you maintain the connection between the ego and the sati, then you have a witness, you have a self-observer, which is not quite completely the ego. It's something that can observe the ego.
Yeah.
Okay. But for somebody to be able to observe the ego, because the ego is not an object, it's not in space and time, you have to be connected with the rest of you, which is the sati. But if you are so indoctrinated, so believer that in reality I must be matter, blah, 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 then you sever all those connections between the ego and the vaster entity are cut. And so you don't even have a self-observer. You just act out. You act out what the body has learned and so on, and you interact like a machine. You basically are a machine. You basically are a machine that has consciousness, and so it's more than a machine, because the machine does not have any experience, any comprehension, but is a very limited to that
to that
ego,
body.
and especially that body. So it's 95% body, 5% spirit, so to speak.
Does the self-observer have the potential to then merge with the oneness more and more, while also keeping some connection to the body?
Yeah, that's right. And the more you train yourself to enter into an expanded state of consciousness through meditation and so on, you begin to reach out to vaster aspects of yourself that are not possible if you pay attention only to the body, because the signals that allow you to have that experience, they are not signals of the body.
No.
They go beyond the body. And that's why the near-death experiencers can experience themselves out of the body, looking at the body, in the operating room, and then they go into another reality and they experience a reunion with people that they love in their life, and they are there to welcome them and so on. And that is all fantasy for a person that only believes that there is matter, space and time.
But it's real in the
Of course
sense
it's real. But it's real only if you accept that there is an interiority that goes beyond what you can measure in space and time. See, if you start with the postulate that all there exists is matter, space, and time, and energy, matter as energy, that's it. You can never find the interiority because it's excluded by your postulate. That's why you have to start with the postulate like the one that I'm saying. The postulate where one has the properties of physics, dynamic, holistic, but he has another property of the interiority, which is wants to know itself.
Yeah. You were fighting this as a physicist for a long time, the materialist viewpoint. And what I'm trying to get is someplace in between with you, where it's this interpersonal thing, which I am most concerned about the future of humanity, because we don't get along with each other. We're not able to know the minds and emotions, the interiority of the other person. We don't even look for it so much anymore. And what you're describing as wanting to know the interiority somehow, I'm trying to get more operational terms that are applicable in this three-dimensional world, 3+1, so that people can learn to love, to open their hearts, to look at their distortions, their guilt, their rage, their hatred, and try to see where these distortions come from and need to be settled so that they can join the oneness that we all are beginning to recognize is what we're part of.
Yeah, but until the authority of science is behind materialism and reductionism, given the waning authority of religions, then we have to have scientists to recognize what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we will continue to justify our egotistical needs as scientific. Because after all, if life, the purpose of life is the survival of the fittest, have you ever heard anything more crazy? Awful, right? Basically, the survival of the fittest means there is only competition. In this reality, there is only competition. The reality that I propose, there is only cooperation, and competition are aberration of something which is the foundation, which is cooperation, working together, loving each other, enjoying that life.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. And my question is, how do we overcome a barrier of materialism, which a lot of people are trying to do? And that's you were here in Charlottesville
I can
as part
tell
of a
you
group.
that if we find a way with a not huge amount of effort, we can give a person an experience of itself, a spiritual experience of itself. In other words, like the experience that I had 34 years ago that awoke me from the delusion that I was the body. If we can do that properly, not with drugs, not with crazy stuff, but maybe three days of retreat, which requires a person to ask himself some questions. Because if you are sure, like most scientists, if you're sure that reality is material and that's it, there is only space, time, and matter and energy, period, then those people will never want to even try to spend 3 days of their life to find if there is something else. So you see, the problem today is that many people believe so densely that there is only space, time, matter, and energy. We got a problem.
There's no
But,
changing that.
and then many other people, they don't know any better. They take the authority of these so-called scientists and they use that authority to basically justify egotistic behavior, justify irresponsibility, and justify trying to get the best out of this life, because when the body dies,
That's it.
that's it. So might as well have fun, right?
Might as well. Well, I'd like to have fun, but we could do it without that point of view. What I'm
No,
suggesting,
we should have fun, but the fun should be not at the expense of others. It should
not
be
expensive,
fun together.
and
Fun
learning and
together.
learning and
Okay.
learning and fun and learning together. So, Federico, what I am trying to suggest as my way of getting us out of the scientism is to help people recognize what they already know is that they have a bit of consciousness in them already. In them, it's outside of them, but they experience it as in them. This ability to self-observe is
Yeah.
a bit of the greater consciousness. And I see
Yes.
that that's okay, good. So if I see that as a portal to greater consciousness, to expand the self observer beyond just the ego and the body, but first to let people experience their self observer. And how do they best experience it? By looking at the distortions, the guilt, the hatred, the negative reactions they have with each other, and using them as lessons, not just to change and learn for the oneness and about themselves, but to learn about the capacity of their self observer to function in their behalf so that we call their attention not so much to their change, but to how they change with the self observer.
Yeah. Yeah. We are here to do that, I think. We are in this world to do that.
To do what? I'd like to know how you heard what I
What to
was
do
saying.
to eliminate the distortions that we have in our own understanding of what we are and what reality is. So we are here to do that, to know ourselves, in other
To
words.
know ourselves. And I think a way to know that, a
Yeah.
big way, is their self observer.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Absolutely.
you made such an important point in this book toward the end about the quality of the witness or the self observer of being dispassionate like materialistic science, or to recognize that you can't be separate from what you're observing.
Yeah.
And in between it is a transition between the materialistic self observer, the dispassionate, distracted somewhat from what's real, the being distant, to recognizing the continuum that gets us into the greater consciousness through our self-observer.
That's right. And that's why, starting with the postulate that I propose, then you can have a new discipline that unites the interiority with the exteriority, meaning and symbol, into a new way of looking where there are no barriers, where there are no boundaries, where there is no right or wrong. There is also right and wrong. Reductionism takes two colors, red and orange, and pretends that there is a very sharp divide line between red and orange. But holistic reality doesn't work that way. When you have everything connected, then there is a region between red and orange that is both red and orange, or neither. Because you would say it's red for you, I say no, it's orange for me. Okay? But in fact, it's neither. But we insist that it must be orange or red. And when you do that, you have destroyed the oneness, the unity of oneness.
And to recognize that I am doing that, I got to be this or I got to be that, my self-observer needs to be activated so I can see it from a different perspective. So what I'm really trying to say to you is that I'm asking you to join me a little bit in this self-observer thing, because you have stated so importantly the two poles of the self-observer, the detached observer and the heart of the whole thing observer.
Yeah, but that means that science must recognize the existence of interiority, the existence of deeper aspects of reality, which are not measurable. Because if you start with the idea, with a space that you must measure, forget it. You have already limited reality. But if a theory of reality could be reality, then all we would need is a theory of reality. But it's not so. That's why there is epistemology and an ontology. You don't eat the theory of reality. The theory of spaghetti is not the spaghetti that you eat.
With clams? I can hear what I'm trying to, I can hear what the link I'm trying to make in what you're saying between the interiority that science does not recognize. Subjective has been a word for it. And that the self-observer is a link to try to then pull the interiority out of the physical dimension into a higher dimension.
Yeah, I can tell you another way that I could think of it.
Please.
Science starts with the idea that everything that exists in this reality is objective. How can that be?
It is, because we have our own experience.
But no, but especially since they don't recognize that there is a subjective reality.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
So in my model, there is a shareable reality, meaning symbols that I and you and others can see. But each person that sees those symbols have a different experience of those symbols and a different understanding of those symbols. Okay.
Yes.
So, but the crucial thing, which isn't come out yet, that will come out in the next seconds, is that through this process of self-communicating, trying to understand with the desire to know, which is honest, not just to publish a paper, no, honest. You want to know, and you have the capacity to know if you are arriving within yourself, that knowledge, you have arrived to the bottom of it almost. Though all knowledge is interconnected, so there is no bottom, but you have arrived at a depth that is so huge, okay, that once we arrive to that coherence in the meaning, then that coherence of the meaning is actually objective. That is the meaning of one. The meaning of one can only be objective, but there is only one.
Because there's only one.
There is only one. So we can actually achieve objectivity in the meaning space, not in the symbol space.
That's so important. That's so important. That's so important. And in that meaning space, I think you're saying love is
foundational. Love, joy, peace, but also there is no separation in that space
of any of those.
You cannot say love and that there is a boundary between love and joy, and there is a boundary between joy and peace. Come on.
Okay.
You see the problem?
Okay. I give up on that one. Of course you're right. Of course. I'm only getting approximations. It's so hard
to give up on that because we are wired that way. Because we live in this reality
of putting labels and boxing.
In which this reality in first approximation can be described as what a computer does: classical, boundaries, material, absolutely,
Categories.
categories. In one side that is true, the other side is false, and there is nothing in between. Mathematics is like that. But Gödel has shown that actually, look at that. Look at that. You can actually find statements that you cannot prove that they are true or false, but not just two or three, an infinity of statements of that kind. So, come on. We should be vaccinated right now, right? But no, we don't want that world. So we hardly talk about Gödel, hardly talk that logic is limited in its capacity to discriminate truth from false. And we continue to go down this road because that's the road that allows us to do what I want and don't tell me what I should do. Okay? Allows me to be responsible, allows me to say, you did that to me, and I'm pure or whatever, right? So that's the world that many people want. They want a world where they can basically control others, dominate others, and be superiors to others. And they don't want to be together because science says that life, the purpose of life, is the survival of the fittest. And I'm the fitter. That's what's
Oh.
going on right now.
I mean, I got caught up with your right there.
Of course.
I'll see if I can get back to where I was trying to go to. I think we're both talking about the direction we want to be able to help humanity go. And the word love, or the experience of love, or divine love, which isn't, it's an experience. It's not something you can use a word for, but it's an indicator. And what we keep needing to be able to do is have words that carry the interiority meaning with them enough so that someone else who has some familiarity with the ideas and the feelings and the experience can also resonate with us. So when we communicate, we have some sense that we are talking about and feeling the same thing.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Federico, we've gone well over what we were going to do, and I thank you for talking with me. This has been a deep pleasure for me to have you kicking my head around to get out of materialistic thinking, which you've caught me doing and politely told me in about 5 different times when I was doing this. And I could tell that you were doing that. And I was like, oh, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so deceptive. That worldview we are all embedded is so deceptive that
But
only
not me, Frederic. Yes, me too. And you caught me doing you helped me catch myself doing it. And I appreciate that. And I needed to it's a kind of a crusty cage that my mind's in, that I keep trying to push out. And part of the way I'm doing that is with synchronicity, which is pretty down here, but it begins to talk about the non-separation between the mind and environment, which is a beginning step towards becoming part of something greater, recognizing our part of something greater. So I start with not a 3-day retreat, but with everyday experiences so that people can have little experiences of being part of something bigger.
Yeah. The difference between randomness, which would exclude synchronicity, and the synchronicity in the sense that you talk about, is really whether you recognize the existence of meaning or not. If there is no meaning, it's all randomness. But if there is meaning, then there may be some randomness, but the thing that matters is mostly
What it
meaning.
means. Yeah.
That's right. The
That's
exploration of meaning, which is knowing yourself.
And that's part of what synchronicity can help people do, is to know themselves.
Absolutely.
We each, I like how you made so clear how we're each uniquely perspectivized.
Yeah.
And that we each have a different view, and mine isn't right. Mine is what I have. And I can listen to what you're talking about, and then I can broaden my ideas, and hopefully you can broaden yours.
Absolutely. It's this cooperation that I'm talking about. Because if my shtick is to want to prove, I want to prove that I'm more than you, okay? Then I will try every possible angle to put you down, okay? In fact, I think that all of us are
I must
here.
be right. I must be right. Yes.
Yeah, all of us are here because in some way we all have a little bit of superiority complex, and we have not understood that each of us is unique, but not more unique than the other. Just unique
We're unique. This is my question.
and equal. Unique
And
and
equal.
equal.
And this is I've written about this same exactly words, that I think each of us in our uniqueness has a unique contribution to make to the furthering of
That's right.
what we need to have.
Yeah.
So you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where the only way that one can know itself is to know itself with all its possible points of view simultaneously. That's what one wants to do.
That
But
quantum,
it needs us to know itself. In other words, we are not there just puppets of one. Most religions, they make us puppets of one. Do the will of one. Well, yeah, but what the hell, wow, right? One knows itself through one, through us. Each one of us is a point of view of one, or a combination of points of view of one, or the sort of elementary points of view of one. That's it. Once you look at it this way, it's wonderful. It's magic.
Doesn't the one want us then to share our points of view with each other?
Of course, but it's the only way to know each other and to know more about ourselves. I cannot know myself without knowing you, because you are part whole of one. You contain within yourself the totality of what you have learned so far, that you know yourself, seen from that point of view that is not yours. You inherited from one. That point of view that you call yourself, which is your identity, that identity is the direction in which one saw itself first when he created you. You field, not the body. You field, not the body. And I say it 3 times. You field, not the body. We are not the body. We are not a machine. We are a field.
We are a field. And I love baseball. So playing on a field has been something I'm used to.
An infinite field.
An infinite field. But your description of the quantum entanglement was enlightening for me, because I finally saw how to view entanglement as part of a field. Each of them are part of the field as a wave on the ocean, but they're part of the same field.
Yeah.
Earlier, I have a question about something you said earlier. I was talking about the mango person, and you said that each of us might then go to people, talk with people who are at the same level, I don't know, of consciousness or something, that there's different levels of awareness that people have that allow them to talk with each other. And you say, absolutely. How does that fit in with uniqueness? Because you get more unique as you get higher consciousness, is the way I think about it. But it's still
no. We're no matter at what level you are a unique point of view, a unique direction in which one has seen itself.
And but you may find people who are like can communicate at your level.
There are also opposites. That's why there is also antimatter. That's why there is also antimatter in the physical world.
Oh, I've been able to find a bunch of people recently who don't like me. And I've been very glad to find that, because it seems so correct to know what I like and who likes me and who doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And one has these characteristics, but it doesn't mean that matter is correct and antimatter is not. And yet they are opposites in all the symbolic aspects, and yet there are points of view that are not disconnected from one.
And that gets us to when there is someone that we have a conflict with, which I've had a big one with somebody recently who I've known for a long time. The idea you tell us in your book is to be able to see how I've co-created that problem. and what
Absolutely.
I've contributed to it.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that takes the dispassionate self-observer to see it for a while.
You can only see that when you transcend the limited point of view of the ego, which is, in your words, would be allowing the witness, the higher level witness that
Okay,
we have, to
thank you.
emerge and to allow you to see that you're taking a very rigid point of view. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I want I think we should stop. I'd like to not,
Okay.
but I think we should.
That was good. That was good, Bernie. It was excellent. Let's do it again. We can go deeper, maybe 6 months. And
I'll put it on my calendar
all right, very
to
good.
ask you.
Good to meet you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.